afternoon, everybody. Welcome to NGLCC Webinar Wednesdays. My name is Sabrina Kent. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm a Senior Vice President at NGLCC. We have a very exciting program ahead for you today. And before we jump into that, please note that we are recording this session as we do with all NGLCC Webinar Wednesdays programs. You can find our recordings at nglcc.org/webinars. Please be sure to utilize this opportunity today to connect with our speaker using the Q&A and chat functions on Zoom. And hello to all of you that are streaming with us from Facebook Live. So before I turn it over to our speaker, I am so pleased to introduce Robbie to you today. Robbie has been an amazing friend to NGLCC over the years, and I get to work with him on a number of initiatives, which makes me very lucky in my role. But Robbie serves as Small Business Leader and Senior Vice President at Wells Fargo. He's actually a 20-year veteran at Wells Fargo, which you'll see in a minute. It's kind of impossible to believe that Robbie could be doing anything for 20 years. I say that every time I look at his bio. I'm like, are you sure this is correct? But in his role, he leads programs that build the team's skills development and focus on serving small business customers. Robbie holds a bachelor's in business administration. He's a graduate of the Pacific Coast Banking School in Seattle. He's also an accomplished speaker and has presented on small business topics at financial industry forums, local and national media outlets, and nonprofit organizations. If you have been to the NGLCC conference, you've surely seen Robbie and met him, and of course, been a recipient of his infectious smile and energy. So Robbie, welcome. We are so glad to have you here today for First Comes Perseverance and Then Comes Growth.
Awesome. Thank you, Sabrina. And good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you are in the country. I hope where you are that things are on an uptick. I'm in Seattle, Washington, so it's a little smoky. We're waiting for the smoke to clear literally. But I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home in a safe environment. I hope that's true for all of you. If we haven't met, Robbie Shapira, as Sabrina shared, thank you for the intro. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I am just so proud to be with you today and to share a little bit of what we have learned and what we know today have been impacts on small business of COVID-19. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to kick us off. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today, some of you may have already seen if you're part of other NGLCC programs like Accelerate. I promise to give it a new twist, so it won't be completely a repeat if you've seen some of this information before. But it is a full-time job. It is more than a full-time job being a small business owner. You are often the janitor, the HR person, and sometimes you get to be the CEO and leader of your organization. But during COVID-19, if there's anything that's happened, it is simply that we have come to expect what we never expected to happen. And so what I will be grateful to give some of you today, or to give all of you today, is some insight on what are we learning from asking small business owners about these impacts from COVID-19, how are business owners pivoting, identifying additional revenue streams, reducing expenses. How are small business owners, and I know we have affiliate chambers on as well, so hello to all the amazing affiliate chambers across the country. Thank you for joining. But how are business owners today staying true to who you are? One of my favorite things, I have been at Wells Fargo 22 years. I started as a wee youngin as a teller in a branch in Arizona. And I was lucky to find something I was so passionate about. My favorite thing about Wells Fargo 22 years later is that this is a company that when you work hard, my company notices. And I so appreciate the opportunity to spend every day working hard for small business. I come from an entrepreneurial family. My family's owned a business for over 60 years that my grandfather and great uncle started, that my father runs today with his siblings. And, watching him growing up taught me a lot of the lessons that I carry into serving small business today, or small businesses today. But then what I get the pleasure of doing every day at Wells Fargo is putting our best foot forward. And we've had hard times. I know you've seen stories about us in the news and how we are remaking ourselves and also going back to what was true about us that we're so proud of. And during a crisis, that's what happens. And so one of the things I'll share with you today that we'll talk about is how do you rally a village around your business? Who's in your village? And how do they at minimum brainstorm with you to help you identify the steps forward? And maybe at best, how do they join with you? What we've identified in the financial industry is where we are allowed to partner. We're a very heavily regulated industry, but where we can, we've joined together because we know that our goals are the same of helping our community, our country to rebound as quickly as we can out of this crisis. So with no further ado, I want to start sharing some of these insights and of what we've learned about COVID-19 and how businesses are evolving. And so the first, I just want to level set some concepts. And one of them is, these initial insights come from March to May as businesses were, and even into the summer, as businesses were reacting to things completely out of your control if you're a small business owner, out of our community's control. Things like if you're brick and mortar, you may not be able to be open like you depended on. And especially if that was a huge part of your value proposition, like it is for us in banking. We as a company that has, have branches in communities across the country in over 39 states and territories, the District of Columbia, we had a lot of adapting to do with protection for our employees and our customers, but really just living up to regulation and local and regional and federal mandates to keep our communities protected. But what we learned at the start of late summer was about 80% of businesses had found a way to reopen, to at least partially begin to provide products and services to their customers. And some of that happened because, in survey, roughly 80% of businesses, or 8 out of 10, are pivoting. If brick and mortar was part of your, how your business thrived and survived, pivoting to an online delivery or walk-up delivery, some type of adaptation is necessary for almost every business. And, I bet many of you are very proud of those pivots, and we're going to talk about some of them today. In fact, I'll ask in a bit, and Sabrina will help us with this, but for you to chat in some of those pivots. So start thinking about how has your business made these pivots, because one of the best learnings in our webinar today is going to come from all of you and the innovation that you've created in your business. And finally, and I know we get more information on this all the time, one of the things that really stands out to me about COVID-19, as a organization, as part of an organization like Wells Fargo, where we want to share information with our customers or our employees, our team members, it is hard to get information out. But when it comes to COVID-19, we are ravenous for information. And so I'm quoting a lot of resources from a website that Sabrina will share with you called the Small Business Resource Center, which are just resources for small businesses, working through and surviving through, or maybe thriving through COVID-19. But one of my favorite key learnings, as I've been just digesting these resources, is that we are just assimilating, we're digesting information at rates never seen before. I mean, we are reading about what Dr. Fauci is saying, or medical professionals, scientists, what our government is telling us at an enormous speed. And so this 55% of business owners don't expect to go back to normal until 2021 kind of feels old already, doesn't it? Because many of us are now looking far into 2021 and hoping and hopefully planning for what might happen with your business if it's going to take that long to get back to what we once considered to be normal. Let me keep going, and I want to put up our first Zoom poll, so Sabrina will load that for us. But one of the realities as business owners that you've had to work through is, can your business live without revenue? And so if it was a 2-month revenue gap, so whatever your business takes in gross sales, for a 2-month period, would your business survive? And there are 3 options. I see you all, I can see, I don't think you can see yet, but I see as you're responding, so thanks for that. Either yes, no, or not sure, please respond, because I'll change my comments a little based on how you respond. So we'll give
you 5 more seconds.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. I think there are 4 of you that haven't voted, so click your button.
Here we go.
All right. Thanks, Sabrina. And so what you're seeing is a pretty good cross section. So for a smaller percentage than half, so 3 of you, you feel like you could survive a 2-month gap in cash flow. Some of you just know you cannot, and many, I would say, probably the majority of businesses are there. But where a lot of us are is in that bucket of I don't know, and I'm going to talk about that today. About if like I said, as business owners, you are also the everything in your business, which often means you are the bookkeeper, you are the CFO of your business, you do your accounting and your taxes. And so I'll give you some simple ideas about evaluating. And what in the financial industry, we talk a lot about forecasting, what it might mean if COVID-19 continues, not just through the end of the year, but into next. And so I promise that's a teaser for what's coming up. But I want to start with giving you every drop of insight I can around what is happening today that I think could be valuable in your decision making as you're looking at the pivots you've already made or looking ahead to pivots you need to make. We'll talk about strategy and connections and marketing, thinking about within your business, how are you getting back to your roots? During a crisis, one of the clear elements is it's a time to re-examine who we are and why we started in this business, in this industry, and how do we get back to what we are just essentially good at. And, in good times, we expand and we try new things. In a crisis, it's a return home to what we know works and what we are most passionate about working towards. So I'll talk about that. And then I'll wrap today with what I imagine you expected I would talk about, which are some capital considerations, not just the Paycheck Protection Program, which I hope many of you participated in. And I'll talk about a little bit of my experience with that program, not making any excuses, but it was an incredible opportunity for business owners to get capital, and it was extremely difficult for everyone involved. And I'll talk about what we know going forward and what we don't, but also talk about beyond Paycheck Protection Program, so PPP, what are other things as business owners you can be considering for future funding. So let's talk about some of these insights, things that we're learning from our on-staff economists, things that we are learning from history as we look at, downturns in the market and recessions of the past. And there's some debate, are we in a recession? Most economists, I think, would say it's a bear market to a degree, though the stock market doesn't always show it. And, that we're probably in the midst of the beginning of, if not, what could be maybe a short-lived recession. But I want to talk about 2 moments in history, because we have faced moments like this before, and some of them generationally are not in our memory. For some of them, they are. So in 1957, there was a new strain of flu. It's the closest thing in US history to what COVID-19 is today. And, that flew very similarly. Our leaders fell ill. The stock market was impacted. The economy tipped into a recession. But it was a short-lived flu because a vaccine was created. And American companies were able to ramp up, and people got inoculated. The recession lasted about 3 quarters. But it led to the stock market dropping about 20%, and it took just less than a year for a rebound. And so while we already know COVID-19 is going to last longer than the 1957 flu, what we also know is that this is something we've been through before. And, we've all had adversity in our lives, some more than others. But what we know about it is that, it teaches us things, and it makes us stronger at times. And, the second example, which I know is talked a lot about in the news, when you think about, the plague of Europe that occurred just before the Italian Renaissance, one of the points that I found most intriguing is that it occurred right before the Italian Renaissance. One of the periods of the greatest growth of art and music and architecture in our world history. And that came out of some adversity. I'm not saying adversity always leads to good things for everyone, but we are a community. And especially, I think, our LGBTQ community, we are a community that supports each other to emerge and to thrive out of adversity. Let me keep going, and I'll show you just some of the impacts in the stock market. So this is the S&P 500 during the 2 most recent recessionary periods. So the dot-com bubble and the Great Recession. And so, spanning from early 2000 to what was the dot-com recovery, to the Great Recession, which really lives very closely in our memories, to what we called the slow and cautious recovery through 2013. What stands out about these is that even though recessions are pervasively negative to our population, to the U.S. population, there are moments of, or there are sectors of relief. So during the dot-com recession, one of the things we saw for one of the first times was discount stores doing quite well. It changed how people were spending. I'm going to talk about some of those insights in a minute. What are some of the spending habits that changed? But it was an advent of people moving their preferred way of looking for new goods and services to how price would impact their buying decision. That was a clear conclusion coming out of the dot-com bubble. Whereas with the Great Recession, what we saw, interesting enough, was while any homeowner was impacted, and obviously home prices and the bubble of real estate was severely impacted, there were very resilient industries, and they sound very similar to the industries that are resilient today. Healthcare companies and grocery stores, those essential services. And so what we saw was innovation within those and a movement towards almost a migration of entrepreneurship to those essential services. And so, I know I'm making a similar point to what I just made, but I wanted to drive home this idea of we will emerge, and there are moments of choice and innovation within times like this pandemic. And I hope to give you some guidance or some insight that will allow you to think about that within your business today. So let me move on then to what do you do to stay up to date, because things are changing so rapidly. And, in our world today, where news is, so incredibly valuable and also has become somewhat controversial, we're all very dependent on finding a trusted source of information. And it's one of the reasons that we created the Small Business Resource Center for small business owners during COVID, is because we know that in your multi-function role as a small business owner, or if you're a chamber leader in your role trying to help small business owners to be successful, that what can happen is you're Googling for information, which means you might go down a bunny trail of something that was true but is no longer. And so finding really trusted sources of information is important, which is why I'm happy to share with you some of the ones that we are pulling together, and our promise that we're going to keep updating it wave after wave of information, not wave after wave of COVID. I hope that doesn't keep happening, but as more information comes in, we will keep it up to date so that you can get the latest advice and guidance financially and within the world of small businesses reacting to COVID-19. The other thing, it's about trying to find positivity. And this is going to be a key element of my guidance, my support, my advice for you all today is, as a consumer and as consumers, so not just me, but all of us, beyond this, who's listening to this webinar right now, we are inundated with hard messages today. And so identifying where there is positivity, even in a hard message, is really critical. This is my favorite example. So my husband and I, we got married just over a year ago. And when we got married, and it's not just my passion, my husband is also very passionate about small business as well, and was before we ever met, but probably a little bit of influence. Let's just be honest. We interact with our partner and change each other in positive, hopefully great ways. But we made a decision for our wedding to only use LGBT-owned companies. It was really important to us. So one of the companies that we used instead of a wedding cake, we did French macarons, and we love them. And so we picked this local company that is LGBT-owned, and one of my favorite things about that company is how they've been telling not then, but one of my favorite things about them today is how they tell their story. Actually, I think they've always been great at telling their story, but how they're telling their story today through COVID-19 is very inspirational to me. It's a story about how they they put their blood, sweat, and tears into this business, how they are proud to be a provider of employment in our community, of the reality of COVID-19 on an industry like theirs, a food service or, a dessert, a boutique, what many would consider to be, a non-essential type of, food service, but very essential to them, their livelihood, their employees. And the story that I received being on their email list over time was, what they were doing, how they were adapting. I learned more about the owner and the business. I learned more about the employees. I learned more about my dedication to them as a customer, my loyalty, and I increased my spend with that business. It was a business I was already loyal to. It was a business that had already won me over, but they shared their truth for me, and they shared it in as positive a way as they could, and they won me over. And so we'll talk a little bit about the impact of positivity in a dark time, and how that is a method, a tool to use as your business continues to adapt. And that goes to this last point of sharing insight with employees and clients. As you are on your journey, it's who you bring with you that can make the biggest difference. So I'm going to move on and talk about strategy, but I want to check in, Sabrina, any questions or comments coming up in the chat that I should address before we keep going?
Thank you, Robbie. Yeah, we are seeing some stories coming. Great for when you get to that open forum discussion, but otherwise no questions. So keep on rolling.
Awesome. Thank you, Sabrina. And thank you all for sharing. Keep typing. We're going to use them. So we'll talk about them in a minute, how your business is adapting, how you're sharing positivity, anything about your journey that you'd like to share. We'd love to hear it in text chat. So thank you for doing that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about strategy. And I kind of gave you the ace in the deck on this already, which is, this is about you examining your business today and identifying who are you at your core, and sometimes going back to that core vision. So I'll give you a quick story. In Paycheck Protection Program, one of my roles at Wells Fargo was talking to our customers that were the most frustrated and the most upset. And so customers who had been in the process, and we couldn't give them as much information as they wanted. We couldn't give them as much information as we wanted. And I'm not making any excuses. It was a very important piece of work, and it was hard on everyone involved. But one of the things that I heard over and over as I was talking to small business owners was, I want to pay my employees next week, and I'm going to be out of money after that. Is my loan going to come in time for me to pay them the next time? I want to reopen my business. I can open at 50%. I can open at 75%, or I've pivoted and I'm doing delivery, or I'm doing online sales. Will the money come in time for me to do this? And we were at a stage where we weren't in complete control of when the funds would be released, because we needed information from the SBA. And so my conversation with those business owners sounded something like, this is a time to make the decisions you need to make, hard as they may be, now. Because every day that you wait lessens your options and the decisions you can make, until eventually, perhaps the only decision you're left with is to close. And that's such a hard thing. I love small business. I love interacting with small business owners. I appreciate and admire your passion. And these are the decisions you ever wanted to make, but all of you have made hard decisions, I'm sure, already. And so as we talk through strategy, I want you to think about, are there decisions you're sitting on? And is today the day to move to the next stage on them? Even if it's asking advice and getting more guidance, but for some of you, it may be doing something today that you've been debating because you want your business to be around to see the upturn, to see the end of this pandemic. And hard decisions are a part of that process. So as we talk through business strategy, this is an example. So, imagine this amazing business owner, and part of her or their business is that, they do health and wellness. And so I am a member of a health and wellness company, and they're closed and they have not reopened in any way. And I am desperate for them to open, especially right now with a smoke-filled city. I would love to be able to go somewhere to work out. But what they've done is they have identified a way to keep communication open. Their vision, their mission is not to have me pay my membership. Their mission isn't, for me to lose a certain number of pounds or to stay healthy. Their mission is the health and wellness or well-being of their customers or their clients, similar to in this example on your screen. And so what they have done very smartly is they keep me advised about their opening. So we're not open yet. Here's when we'll give you your next update. Here's where you'll find an update. You may have heard that others are opening. Here's our reason why we're not, to keep you safe. And while you're home, here's a home workout you can try out. Check out this video. And while I have a tough time doing home workouts, I need to get better at them. It is a great way to keep me in the conversation. I know where to go for updates. And if somebody asked me about a great workout strategy, I would say, I have this company I love, and even in COVID-19, they're finding ways to engage me as their customer. So I would recommend that. And I'll talk about more, but you all know this, just the power and value of a recommendation from a friend or family member, and just how incredibly influential that is. So let's keep talking then about, as you're analyzing your strategy, one way to do that is to think about your customer journey. And there's lots of steps to this, but it's in essence the sum of experiences, start to finish, from when your customer first interacts with you to when they are loyally transacting, hopefully on a very consistent basis with you. And so as you're thinking about what you can do within the customer journey, it's helpful to know what customers are thinking today. So here's some more analytics. This comes from the Harris poll, which was published in late May of this year, and really asking, because of COVID-19, how have spending habits changed? So one of them is this probably sound really obvious to us now, sitting, today in September. I have to look that it's still September because, the world is so crazy. It is September. And so 54% of us aren't traveling for leisure in 2020. That sounds very true to me as a consumer. 83% of us are exercising at home versus going to the gym. You just heard how true that is for me. Only 25% of us are planning or would think to go to a movie theater right now. And you've seen some of the adaptations that streaming companies are using to deliver new movies to us at home like they never have before. It's interesting how that might continue. But even in late May, when a lot of communities were spiking in infection rates and we were being just inundated with the impacts of COVID-19, the horrible impacts, 76% of us said we were still going to the grocery store versus doing online delivery. And so what's interesting about this is that things will change. And in banking, what we've seen is obviously a very strong desire to be able to do your financial transactions mobile, over the phone, or on a website, over the internet. And what's great about that is that some of our customers were very pleasantly surprised. The average small business owner had never deposited a check using the mobile app with us or with any other financial institution. The average small business owner wasn't logging into their account on a daily basis, maybe not even weekly. The average small business owner had never done a transaction like a wire transfer without going into a branch. And we love seeing you in our branches. They are built for you. They exist because you want them still. But it also has taught us in our industry how we have to continue to adapt. And as habits change, how do we build out our offering and make it as user-friendly and as easy as possible? And it's a journey we're still on, but it's part of our customer journey we've been considering. So on this topic of customer journey, I'm curious, I asked earlier, but what are some of the adaptations you've made? You heard some of the ones that we're making in the financial industry. I'm curious what some of yours may be. So Sabrina, if we have one already, that'd be awesome. If not, let's give them a minute or two to type in some.
Yeah, Robbie, thank you. We do have a few here in the chat, and folks, please keep them coming. This is great to see. You might recognize some of these voices from Accelerate, but first we have Ben Kennard from 5 North saying lots of our in-store sales have dropped off in March and April, so we've had to focus more on e-commerce. Ronald Kraft from the Bonovox Group says, we've moved from business development at conferences and such to using LinkedIn and other social media to find and develop prospects. And then Kellen Berry, and sorry, Kellen, I'm not sure which company you're with, but I'm so glad you're contributing, says, we recently started an e-commerce store, but our first tier growth plan was to hit the LGBTQ pride and trans in-person events. Not having those events has forced us to focus more on rapidly obtaining affiliate program members and establishing wholesale contracts. So that's what we've seen so far.
Those are great. Thank you. Yeah. And so what you're hearing your peers share around innovation and moving to online, either delivery of product and or online payment. Those are really common ones. I'm going to show you some of the most common ones that you probably have heard of, maybe a couple that you haven't. But what's interesting as we look at some of our financial trends, what really has stood out to me is how payment trends have changed. So I pulled some stats this morning. And so these statistics come from MasterCard. And, so according to some of MasterCard's data, 8 out of 10 of us now are using contactless payment. So that means instead of handing my card and having it get swiped or put the chip into a machine, there is some other way. So whether that's Apple Pay or Android Pay, what we call a mobile wallet. There's also, you probably have noticed this too, on your card, there's a little wavy symbol that lets you hold your card over the machine instead of putting your card in the machine. But that growth of 8 out of 10 is enormous. And that was based on back to February, just looking at the stat on it. The ability to do it had been there, but the utilization of it was significantly lower. As another example, a lot of you receive contactless, not just contactless, but card not present payment, which means that, your customer's not in front of you at all. They're paying, hopefully over a secure web portal, but maybe they're paying over the phone by giving you their number, which is just not a great way to pay, by the way. So talk to your financial institution about other options. Costs you a lot more to do it that way. But what we have seen with one of the trends in the industry was in 2019, those types of payments were about 30% of payments. And as of March, they were 55% of payments. And so some of this adaptation means you're changing your business. You're employing people, but you're employing them differently. You're leveraging different tools. And sometimes it means that you're trimming back in areas of your business that were revenue providing, but maybe expensive, to other more economical branches of your business that allow you to really expand a revenue stream and reduce expenses. So I want to talk about that customer journey one more time, but I want to talk about it in these steps. And so as you're examining who you are, the vision of your business, who you are in COVID-19, and to be honest, who you may be emerging from COVID-19, it is worth the time to sit with some trusted members of your village. So maybe these are some of your employees. Perhaps it's a mentor. I'll talk more about mentorship later on. Perhaps it's one of the awesome people from your local LGBTQ chamber or the business organization that you're a part of. But obviously, I have a deference to our LGBTQ affiliate chambers and the NGLCC. So, looping in an advisor, who knows and is hearing stories every day of how businesses are struggling and adapting and finding new pathways. But discussing what and who you are, now is the time to do it. Because otherwise you're just reacting. And now is the time to start being proactive. And so thinking then about discovery and how did you reach your customers before? And if you're a brick and mortar business, you reach them in a very different way than you're going to reach them today. And thinking about things like not just the obvious ones like your social media presence, and I hope it's obvious, but also your customer lists and your email lists. How can you get yourself in front of your customers to tell them about who your business is today? And encourage friends and family and even your employees to be part of your story. And then thinking about that buying cycle. So do they buy the first time they interact with you? Many of you are in industries, I can only imagine, where it's multiple interactions before a purchase decision is made. And so how do those interactions look today? How have they evolved with different types of interacting with you? Do they need to hear about you on social media? And then when they visit your site, be encouraged, and then maybe you get some of their contact information and you send them a communication, and that leads to a purchase decision. Understanding your customer's journey is so critical. Again, it's a hard time to dwell in the moment of what is my business reality today, but if we don't, we are just continuing to be reactive. I know I've said that a couple of times. And then finally, just the function of it. You heard me share some things around contactless payment and card not present, but your customers, our customers, are changing. And so understanding what their preferences are is more critical than it's ever been. And then helping them to see the best of you. It's one of the reasons I'm on today, is to help you see, hopefully a new or a different or a better, or, maybe just the same, perhaps you have a great vision of Wells Fargo. But, telling our story is really important to me, and who we are and what we're about and what we're looking to accomplish. So as you're thinking of all this, your value proposition may start to evolve, or it may begin to go back to the core and the heart of who you were. And so I just wanted to give you some thoughts around, making it relevant and true, and sustainable and differentiated, in this time is more critical than ever. One of the resources we offer on wellsfargoworks.com, that Sabrina will also put in the text chat, thank you, Sabrina, you're so great, appreciate you, is a business plan tool that we offer completely free to anybody. So you don't have to be a Wells Fargo customer, but it may be the exact right time for you to invest in just talking about and putting your passion and your ideas into something that you can share with others, but also something that can help you to reevaluate and to consider who your business is today through COVID-19. Here are some of those examples I was talking about earlier of those pivots that probably you've heard about, but if you haven't, these are really innovative ideas as breweries and distilleries realized, I have the raw materials of what is needed so desperately, and I can provide, those services in a new way, or hair salons. And, I talked about the fitness example who, are going to say, if you're going to do this at home anyway, let me at least be part of the dialogue with you, because I want you to come back when you're ready. And if somebody asks you, I want you to refer them to me. And, those that are probably the most impacted, industries like restaurants and hospitality, identifying ways and new revenue streams. All of this comes from rallying your village, your team, examining who you are at your core and who you really want to be, trimming out some of the things that perhaps are very expensive for you, and their revenue stream from those has become less with COVID-19, and focusing on the core of who you are that really helps your business to be relevant today and to access your customer base. So due to time, I'm going to keep going because I want to share with you a few more ideas, and I want to get to the financial advice at the end. I talked about this a moment ago, but friends and family, as you know, is such an influential resource for a small business owner. And one of my favorite examples is something we did at Wells Fargo. So we decided to send out some kits to our employees across the country that are going into the office every day. So there's some like me that, I'm very lucky and grateful to be able to work from home, but some of our team are not able to work from home. And so, it's just a simple thing, but I have seen more shares of Wells Fargo employees talking about receiving a mask and some hand sanitizer and, just some appreciation and support from the, unexpectedly from their employer. And so think about your village is automatically your employees, whether they're 1099 or W-2'd, but how we all rally and share and talk about, what's happening today is really impactful. And as I move into some of the communication and marketing concepts of the insights we have to provide, one of the key ones is that talking about COVID-19 and our current reality is important. People pay more attention. 78% of businesses said they have created a specific communication around COVID-19. Some of the basic things like your hours of operation and your methods of, purchase, but even other things like if you're not talking to your employees about their health and safety and their mental well-being, now is a great time to do that because you want them to be promoters of your business. They are when they're on the clock, but even when they're off the clock, they're very influential. And that's true of your whole village. So think about your communication channels. And if there's opportunity there, it's a great brainstorm item for your village is how could I communicate more? How could I leverage the communication channels that I have? So kind of summing this up, getting to the heart of your mission, thinking about your customers and your customer journey and how that has changed, getting feedback and insight from your customers, taking the time to really write it. Use our business plan tool if that's of service to you, but changing your go-to from if you're reactive today to far more proactive in your decision-making, and then rallying our community, working with your affiliate chamber, working with your customer base, your employee base. There's lots of us that are fans and want you to be successful. And so I hope that we're all contributing in the best ways we can. Let me bridge over to connections and talk about if you're feeling alone today. Many of us are. I barely leave my house anymore, and some of that is the smoke, but just the reality of our lives have dramatically changed. And so finding ways to get the connections we need to feel supported and to get the right advice. One of my favorite pieces of small business advice is if you don't have a mentor in your industry, you desperately need one. Someone who is years ahead of you in terms of the journey of your business, in their life cycle, they've been where you've been. And ideally someone who doesn't directly compete. I was talking to a small business owner earlier today, actually, one of our LGBTBEs, and I had a quick connection and we were talking about one of their competitors. And the funny thing is that was the first thing this small business owner said is we're not really competitors because there's so much to go around and we're both vital and we can help each other. And so that creates great interconnectedness or support. And so think about maybe that's one of your to-dos today is there's never been a more important time to have someone to guide and advise and mentor you in your business. And so identifying what you need from them and asking them very specific questions on goals, being as vulnerable as you feel comfortable about your expenses and your revenue streams and what is on your plate to discuss. It is a time when none of us should have to feel alone. It's a time when a lot of us do, but what we can do about it is so important. And it's one of the benefits I firmly believe of the NGLCC and of all of our affiliate chambers. One of the examples of that we've seen some difference is LinkedIn is talking a lot about, with so many of us at home, their utilization has gone up considerably. And so identifying even trends in where you are present and deciding where you could become more present. And LinkedIn might be a great place to do that because their utilization has increased so much. It means that they are more a platform today than they were before the pandemic. And so your presence there, your story, how you're communicating, how your supporters are communicating about you is another methodology or another method to increase your village and increase your adaptation, your innovation within your business. I am going to spend just a minute on this because all of you are part of a small business organization, whether that's the NGLCC and or an affiliate chamber. But please lean on the resources they provide. As I talk to my local chambers, the GSBA, the Greater Seattle Business Association, and I'm so proud to be not just a member, but on their board. And when I talk to the staff at the GSBA, what they talk about is, how they help the business owner today and how they feel more vital than they ever have and how their hearts go out, but they also become just epicenters of, or that's not the right word, but you get it. Like they're the center of creativity and information and resources. And I'm so grateful for them. So this is some of just maybe a summation of some things to consider as you're networking within COVID-19. As you're connecting in your communities, with your village, through your employees and your resources to your customers, it's the thoughtful connection that counts. And that makes it harder, I know. But coming up with what you need, knowing firmly where your business is, offering to help if you can, and looking for ways to collaborate. Like I said, a competitor of pre-COVID is a partner today in so many industries. And so looking across at your peer businesses and talking about collaboration is happening more. It's something bringing us together. I'm a big Mr. Rogers fan, and so I always talk about looking for the helpers, and it just what I see in our community, because I'm looking for it, are lots of people wanting and willing to help. But being specific is so critical. Knowing what you need, knowing where your business is. Those of you that were unsure about, can you survive a 2-month revenue gap, as an example, is a question I implore you to get the answer to. And again, I'll share with you some resources that will help you. So I'm going to skip ahead. Talked a lot about this around marketing, but I would love to hear from you. So as you've been thinking about your customers before today, so before this webinar, what have you been doing to embrace them in a new way, to share your journey, to even embrace a positive message? Would love some of your examples. And to Sabrina, I'll turn it back to you for any of that chat in.
Awesome. Thank you, Robbie. Yeah, folks, let's hear. We'd love to learn more about how you're sharing your journey. And I know, Robbie, we've talked about this before, but something that the NGLCC media team has been doing very intentionally, and I think doing very well through the course of the entire pandemic, is ensuring that we are giving positive coverage, that we're talking about the great things that our LGBT businesses are doing, because as you know, it's a very grim landscape for small businesses right now, but there's also a lot of good coming out of our community. I always say, I think we have the best and the brightest, and we have the innovators, and that's something we've really tried to tie onto in our messaging at NGLCC. And I see here in the chat, Ben says, a newsletter, but I need to be more intentional about it and being present at online events as much as possible, which is so true. Ben is like on every NGLCC program I can think of. And I know we're not the only organization you belong to, Ben. So that's great to see. And folks, if you have any other thoughts you'd like to share here, we'd love to include that as a part of today's discussion.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Sabrina. Knowing that we have 10 minutes left and that you are busy, folks, let me keep moving, but if there's really great ones, Sabrina, I know you'll interject them and share, because it's wonderful to learn from your peers, and they're group chatting in, so keep an eye on the group chat too. If we don't get to them, you can obviously read along as we go. But let's keep talking about crafting your message and thinking about how might your business be adapting. And that's a good place to start. Just asking yourself that question of what really has changed within my business. And am I telling that story? Is there a story to tell? And what's really cool with social media is it gives you the advantage of telling your story in a couple different ways and seeing if one gets more reaction than another. And who shares the information with their following, their connections, and even reaching out and asking them, what about this resonated with you? Or if you were to promote, if you were to share this with your network, what would it need to contain? Your village will surprise you with how helpful they can be when you just ask for what that might look like. And so as you're thinking about your messaging, I know I shared a little bit of this already, but talking about COVID-19, we're all listening about what is going on and what we can be doing. And so it is proven that mentioning COVID-19 sees higher engagement because we're paying attention. Something else that's interesting is, as businesses are adapting, the traditional ways of knowing if you can go to your bank branch changed. We used to post our hours on the door and that was all you ever needed. I was a branch manager once upon a time, and we would get phone calls of, what are your hours? But now think of the last time you did that. You go to Google Maps and you click on my hour, or not mine, but our hours. And, and so keeping those up to date is so critical. I know as I've been looking at, we need a car repair as an example, and I spent a lot of time hunting, trying to figure out the hours of this car repair shop that, had already actually, we had a little fender bender months and months ago, and they'd done some repairs and there was something not working. So we needed to go back to them. And, so think about your customer experience from that perspective too. You're frustrated when you try and find out information? Is your business really putting that information at your customer's fingertips. I know we talked a lot about customer journey, but looking for those organic moments where you can talk to business owners. My example, that same macaroon company, I sent a message over Instagram to the owner, and I talked about, hey, it's our 1-year anniversary. I'm going to buy a box of the macaroons we had at our wedding, kind of like as if we had saved a piece of cake in the freezer, the old way, so that we can enjoy the same macaroons that we had at our wedding. Just an idea. You could have sent me an email asking me to do that, and I would have thought that was cool. I would have said, hey, you're willing to put a box together and you remember the flavors I ordered, and here's the price. I was like, I did it anyway, but just an idea. I know we're all looking for good ideas. And we had a great dialogue, the business owner and I, about that idea afterwards. And so your customers will give you ideas, your most loyal customers in particular. And we talked a lot about how this shows up digitally. And so just think about, how can you get that insight? Some of it is in the moment, asking your network. There's lots of social media analytics, and so engaging. There are great LGBT BEs that would love to consult with you. If you've got budget to consider right now as you're making your pivot, some of your village may be hired help, and that's totally okay if that's within your wheelhouse. So please engage with the NGLCC or within our network for those business owners. As you're looking to say, if I'm going to put money out right now, it's even more critical that it come back to my business. I'm going to skip ahead to the financial stuff because I just have a few minutes left. And I'm going to skip this poll if that's okay, Sabrina, just for sake of time. Because what I really want to talk about is, especially for those of you that don't know your impacts, is if I can make it as simple as possible, it is. You have revenue, you have expenses, and they've changed. And I know that sounds simple when I say it, but looking back literally at the money that's come in and literally at the money that's going out, and all of it is, impactable, and the money going outside, it's very negotiable. And so if we had time, I would love for people to chat in new revenue streams they have identified or expenses they've cut down on. So if you have an example, please do chat it in so your peers can learn from your success. But as you're examining, please go to the Small Business Resource Center. There's a great article on examining your cash flow. There's a worksheet for you to be able to look at the impacts of COVID-19. Because if it's a 10% drop in revenue, then it needs to be met with a 10% drop in expenses, or you're eating into your reserve balances. And every dollar of difference is another month maybe that your business won't be able to emerge out of COVID-19. And so just that level of realism is so critical. And it's hard because when things get hard, we don't want to know some of that reality just emotionally, but our heads have to take over here and knowing the reality of your business. Because tracking your spending, forecasting is so critical, even as you're considering some of these programs like PPP or what's available today, like the Main Street Lending Program or community support organizations. As an example, at Wells Fargo, we decided that every dime we received from the SBA for PPP, we didn't recoup our costs. We donated it all. It was $400 million. We gave it all to CDFIs. So if you don't know what a CDFI is, please look it up. They're community development financial institutions. They're often called microlenders, so that they could increase their lending programs, so that they could create a grant program. We're about to announce the next stage of it for nonprofits. And so it's just one way, and we're not the only ones contributing, because we know that out of PPP, no matter what our federal government decides, we will need the nonprofits to support small business to make it out of COVID-19. And so please look into those. Look up your local CDFI if you've never heard of one. They're great organizations, these nonprofits that help businesses that don't have access to other types of loans or lending. They literally create programs for that business, no matter how big or small. Well, maybe too big, but yes, no matter how small, I'll say it that way. The last thing is remember, like I said, everything's negotiable, and that includes with your financial institution. So if you're getting charged fees, if you have a loan or a line of credit that you owe on, that you're making payments on, I hope many of you have taken the opportunity for deferral. Oftentimes it's deferral with either some forgiveness of expense. But, again, if we had the time, I'm sure you all could chat in, how you've talked to your landlords, your your utilities, and your financial institutions, just to name a few as examples to trim back some of your expenses. So here are the final thoughts. Forecasting, understanding your reality, looking at other opportunities. Maybe you'd never heard of a CDFI and you'll look them up today and see if there's a program available for you. And then talking to your banker. You know, I always talk about what I think a good banker is. A good banker knows you, really takes the time to listen. But, you know, I work really hard to make the bankers at Wells Fargo the best they can be. And what I ask of them every day is, you know, no matter what situation a business owner's in today, we should find some way to help them, whether it's a resource, a connection, but there are very tangible ways that we can help small business owners today too. And I'm proud of the bankers that do that every day. So with that, just remember this too shall pass at some point. The goal is, let's just all be on the other side when it does. And I hope to continue to see all of you at NGLCC events and beyond, and I'm proud to have been with you today. Here's the SBRC. Sabrina will put the link into the chat. And again, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Robbie, thank you so much. You always do such an excellent job, and I always learn something new. I think this might be the third or fourth time that I've heard a version of this, and every time I have a new takeaway. I'm very proud that my family of small business owners also bank through Wells, and they have had their support for the last 20 years from Wachovia days into what is now Wells Fargo. So we are so lucky to be able to work with you and to work with Wells and to have you supporting our LGBT businesses in the way that you do. So thank you so, so much for that, Robbie. Thank you to each and every one of you that attended. Of course, recordings, as I said before, are available at nglcc.org/webinars. I'll also be sending you a wrap out email with some of the resources that Robbie mentioned today, along with his email, so that you can get a hold of him for any questions that you might have particular to running your small business and getting your feedback on the ground during what is otherwise a very wild time. Don't forget, we're back here every Wednesday. Next week, we have an awesome session presented in partnership with the NGLCC Communities of Color Initiative and Johnson & Johnson, a prep seminar for our upcoming matchmakers on October 1st. So this is for anyone that wants to learn how to maximize their time in matchmakers, or if you're a corporate partner and you want to, and you've never done matchmakers before and you want to see how it works on the virtual system, that's what that program is going to be for. So we'll see you back next Wednesday, as always, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. Robbie, thank you so much again to you and Wells Fargo for sharing this time with us. And I hope all of you have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.